Hello and welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Oats with my co-host Vicky Basita and our special guest for today, our very first IFBB Pro on the show. It is Rob Waterhouse. Welcome to the show. Such a pleasure to have you on, mate.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to catch up.
Hi, I'm just going to jump in there and say hi. I missed the last episode, didn't I, on for the Love of Oats, because I had to do my own one, and then we just couldn't get scheduled redone. So, but this is a really exciting one because I've known Bob for years. We've hung out backstage together. He's taken the piss out of me when I haven't looked like great and when I've looked like a potato, and I've just taken the piss out of him because he's got the teeny tiniest mug that he's drinking. Nope. Look how small that mug is. I mean, guys, I swear to God, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you are missing out. Bob pulls the most amazing diet face. So just as he popped up, it was like, wow, you're looking lean, man. But
it looks twice. I wear one of the new age mouthpieces when I train, and it makes it look twice as bad because obviously you're biting down and then sucking at the same time.
Whole skeleton.
Really good cheekbone lines. So.
But this is what the extremes we've got to go to be IFBB pros. Is that not right?
Well, I think so. As I said, I think I'm a bit of an exception because I have a good fat face off season. So then everyone's like, whoa, you're looking lean. It's like, yeah, but probably if I didn't get as fat, people wouldn't notice it as much. So
it's one extreme to the other. But yeah, it does make your mug look extremely small. But there is a very poignant case as to why you're using a mug like that, because an espresso is too small, and yet a mug like mine, which is the size of my head, it's too big. So, we've got to take care of bladder issues at the same time.
Volume of liquid.
Yes, this is it. Right, so Bob, for people who don't know who you are, because, they should do, just give us a little bit of an introduction, who you are, where you've come from, how long you've been training, all of that jazz.
Cool. So we won't go too far back, but yeah, I've been training almost 20 years now. Started bodybuilding in 2008. Started off very successfully. I won the British Championships as my first run as a junior back in 2008 at 22. Did fairly well all the way throughout from 2009, 2010, like runner-ups at British finals and lightweight divisions. Took a couple of years off, pro card in 2013. Yeah. Competed as a pro over from sort of 13 to 17. With mixed results from Grand Prix to Worlds, and obviously just got better as it's gone on. So 2016 and 17, I won Worlds as a pro lightweight. And obviously this year, fast forward to 2020 prep, winning obviously IFBB Pro card in classic physique.
Very crazy.
Right.
And your classic physique is beautiful. I mean, I don't want to just embarrass my mum, because my mum listens to these, but she did actually question me back in 2017? That was when we competed together, wasn't it? 2017. Yeah, and she said, who was that man in the middle? Because he is beautiful. So, even my mum thinks that you're beautiful. But I think that's the most easiest and nicest way to describe classic, in my opinion, because you do have beautiful physiques. It's not like the big butch bodybuilders. There is something very, very different about classic, isn't there?
To be fair, like when I was competing in the natural shows, like your physique was one of them that was like, wow, okay, that is attainable naturally. And now the point has been proven even more so because you've got the accolade of being an IFBB Pro, which is like phenomenal, because it's like, again, wow, that is achievable naturally. That's incredible.
So yeah, I would definitely say it's one of them as well. I think that, as I've sort of tried to say on sort of various posts and the bits and pieces before, that I was nowhere near the best bodybuilder on that stage, but I was definitely the best classic physique. And people who maybe like from other competitors from the show, like firing up pictures, like, I look like the smallest and not quite as conditioned as some of the other guys. But as I said, it's all about shape and flow with classic. And when people obviously get that, filling criteria, that's what really matters. And I'm really glad that they judged it like they judged that, because, it's very much become a thing of people doing classic who are just meeting a height and weight criteria. but not actually ticking boxes of what it should be. So that's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, you do often see that is where people, again, just fit the criteria and they go in and not truly understanding what classic is. Like I had the ambition myself to go into classic physique, and then I looked at my physique and I was like, it's not classic. You know, maybe I could potentially get into the height and weight ratio, but would I get the result that I want? Because it won't.
Yeah, it's a tough one with you guys. I think you're sort of like borderline, because I think that if you sort of posed a bit more classic for classic, you could probably get away with it and do quite well. But as you said, you could have someone like turn up with myself who's just be smaller, not quite as hard and not as big a legs kind of thing, and then go, all right, but that's still more classic, and then you get beat by a smaller, less conditioned guy, so to speak. So it's kind of like, it's kind of a hard one for people to wrap their heads around, really.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were going into this show, was the goal to win the overall and the IFBB Pro card?
So it's kind of a hard one, I think, because I think that from the very first moment that I knew I was going to do two bros, I think that you always train with that in the back of your head, like, what if? Like, could it be possible? But I think that all the way through, I don't think I put that pressure on myself to think like I have to win at all costs. But my kind of main reasoning, as I was speaking to my missus about it, like the start of prep, was like, I wanted to compete in other federations like Two Bros and PCA to try and raise my profile a bit with regards to coaching. Because I wanted to take on more clients. I eventually want to phase out of my other job and coach full time. And I just thought I just need to kind of put myself on sort of a different page with regards to like working with different athletes. But obviously, you know, we always train to win, and it was kind of like, well, what if you did do that? And people would always say, well, you've got a classic physique, you've got to do classic. But I think that it was always one of them of like seeing other people and not really knowing Two Bros enough of people who had one classic physique like pro cards previously. So I think it was always there in kind of like in the back of my brain, but on the same side, it was like, okay, like you've actually got no right to go to those shows and do really, really well, because I'm either going to go and do really well or I'm going to get absolutely blasted, and that's just a lesson. So it was one of them, really. So
yeah, definitely. So I suppose when you actually won the card, it was like, holy shit, this has just happened. I bet there was one.
It really was, yeah. It was. I mean, obviously, I think I've probably said before, but the way they did the call outs in the class, in Class B, that usually like you would like get in a lot of judging shows, you'd get like confirmation rounds. So they would bring out the last call out. They'd probably bring out your top 5, and everyone, they would sort of maybe have one little last pose down. But in essence, what they actually did was they left the top 2, which was me and a guy called Johnny, out of that call out. So I was looking to him thinking, well, he was in the middle a lot. So I was thinking maybe it's me and him. But then they brought through like 5 guys who are like absolutely jacked, all peeled. And I was like, right, so we're both at the top 5. And that's how it went. And then when they said, oh, we're going to call the next, the top 5 out to do the routines. And then obviously I was in with a shout. And they're like, oh, you're obviously in the top 5. It was then like, that was that bit of relief. But then like from that point onwards, I was just like, like sitting there, crossing my fingers, crossing my toes that I'd made the top 5. And then I think when actually, like, obviously I'd actually won my class, like I was just over the moon. All the pressure went off. Like I was as much as I just went out to enjoy the overall, because I just thought, you've done it. Like, you've won a British title. Like, this is just now for fun, because these other guys obviously pumping up backstage were all crazy big, all got, fairly decently classic physiques as well. And I just thought, like, I'm just going to go have a good time. And it really did show, actually, in the overall. Like, I was there like, having a good time, not really too worried where I was going to win or not. And maybe that all made up for, your stage presence and the whole sort of ticking boxes at the end, I think, really. So yeah, it was a big surprise.
Yeah,
It's
Absolutely.
lovely as well to see it, to be perfectly honest with you. So let's go for the really big question that everyone's going to ask you and why they're not thinking about it all the time. What made you, over all the years through your sporting endeavors and bodybuilding and classics and everything else like that, what made you not want to cross over and actually use any kind of performance enhancements at all?
I think it was always one of them. I think it stems back from childhood of getting into bodybuilding. So the very, very first thing is kind of, we go way, way back, was the, how should we say, not ignorance, but kind of like just lack of knowledge. So I grew up in a town called Abingdon, which is just outside Oxfordshire. The gym that I joined was run by Coach DSL, or Darren Loxton. Yeah. And me and him started bodybuilding together. And we picked up bodybuilding magazines and didn't know that guys in the magazines were taking steroids. Like, it was just, you know, you didn't have Instagram and Facebook really back then, as far as maybe it was just starting to come out. But it wasn't kind of what it is today, if that makes sense. So that was kind of the first thing, as like the absolute kind of like, just like, no one in our gym were like, you know, like you're walking around like jacked and, you know, like thinking, well, why is that guy so big? What's he doing that I'm not doing? It was such a small kind of like corner of the world kind of thing that it wasn't really kind of talked about and known about. Mm-hmm. So that was the first thing. I think the second thing was maybe my dad's influence. It was always kind of talked about, like, some of these guys do steroids and, you know, you never want to go down that path. So that was kind of maybe just his influence. And then, do you know what I think, what the biggest thing is? I think that it was, one, not having anyone who was kind of like pushing it in our direction, but secondly, just doing so well in natural bodybuilding straight off the bat.
For sure.
If you go into a natural bodybuilding show and you win the British title and you win your qualifier in the very, very first year, it's hard to want to go into any other direction, because I had friends at the time who saw me compete and went, we think we're going to dabble in a little bit and we'll be bigger than you in 6 months' time. And that happened, and they never did either. They sort of like, some of them just got spottier and not much bigger. And then it was all of a sudden like, wow, you've really got something there, because your kind of like physique is sort of growing like this. And everyone else was just like, wow, I've seen this guy. And I obviously made a lot of progress in them sort of, you know, like, you know, earlier years. And from a British, like, you know, British Championship sort of like junior bodybuilding level, I was leaps and bounds ahead of most of the guys at that time. One being because I was one of the older juniors. Sure. So I was 22 and they only just raised the year that year to like under 23s instead of it being like 19. So I was sort of, you know, at that age, it makes all the difference in maturity to how your physique looks. And as I said, it was just like from that point onwards, like I'd just done really well. So it was like, well, why do I want to cross over? And it was said, we didn't have our gym wasn't a gym where it was really talked about. It wasn't really anyone who you knew. Like, you'd have to go to Mike Sheridan's gym in Oxford, who was an IFBB, because that's apparently where what they used to call, that's where all the juice heads train. Yeah, that was what was kind of talked about, and it was like something of a bit of a cult, and no one really knew much about. It was almost like a Dorian Yates style training gym that he had down at the rowing club, and that's what was kind of like known as. So, you know, I didn't have a guy there going, oh, well, maybe you should just like try a bit of this because it will make you really big. Like, we just didn't have that. So it's kind of some of that as well, I think. It's nice not to have all of that social influence.
Yeah. Still be, and I think that's all it is, isn't it? Because a lot of things happen these days all down to peer pressure. And I mean, we spoke about this the other day, didn't we, Jack, about 18-year-olds who have literally been in the gym for 8 months and are coming to us and they're like, oh yeah, I'm on this and I'm on that and I'm on the other, and it's like, mate, you know, not being funny, but at 17, 18, your testosterone levels are through the freaking roof anyway, you know, you certainly don't need any more.
I do have a lot of kids coming up to me and say, oh, I'm going to start. I'm like, don't, because you are so young and, you know, you've only just started training, love training, fall in love with training. But yeah, there's definitely an element of peer pressure making that decision to crossing over. I also think, as you said, it's kind of like people like looking at my physique and going, I want to look like that now. That's 20 years of work, you know, that's, you know, and people aren't going to want to wait 5 years. And I've said this on, you know, another podcast, is that
I probably could have got to that physique that I have now quicker.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's going to maybe half the amount of time, would it? Would it look the same? I don't know. But on the same side is like, I'm sure if you ask a lot of people, like, okay, if you just did this and your health's going to be good, like, would you do it? And probably most people would say yes, I guess. I don't know. It's a personal choice. I don't know.
Yeah,
true.
Absolutely. Go on.
Oh, right, okay. I was just going to say, one of the things that you just touched on there was, if you had taken something, would you look different as to now? Personally, in my opinion, right, I think that you would have looked different, but almost in a negative way, if you get what I mean, because I see some of the guys now who possibly don't, you know, I don't know whether they're doing their dosages wrong or something like that, or their nutrition isn't on point, because again, people who do take PEDs kind of like let their nutrition slip a little bit because they can get away with it a bit more. But things like midsection control, I've seen very different. You are like miles above anybody else in terms of midsection control for a classic physique. Would you agree with that when they have this almost kind of distension going on in there?
Yeah, and I mean, I'd love to know kind of what it is. I don't know if it's just because, if it's actually like, you know, your obliques are getting thicker because all the muscles are growing in your body and you're lifting, squatting heavy and deadlifting heavy because it makes that. Not that I really think that deadlifting and squatting heavy on its own will give you a big waist. Otherwise, you know, lots of guys who compete in a natural fed, you know, who are chucking up ridiculous numbers all have tiny midsections. So I don't know if it's that. I think from a kind of a sort of like, you know, if I reflect on my own physique, I think that I'm very genetically blessed with good midsection.
Yeah.
So like I've got like a 29-inch waist and my abdominals are like parked nicely and very well separated. So I think that like that, you know, that just, I had that when I was like 9 years old. So, okay, I've built on them. But you know what I mean? I had abs as a kid and it was like, and they were always like nicely put together. So that's something that, you know, I've obviously, yes, I've trained them so that they've got thicker and more detailed as I've lost more body fat. But really, as I said, I think that's something that, you know, from a classic physique standpoint, like you can't, you know what I mean? You could do abs every day of the year and you'd still never have that midsection.
Yeah,
so I'm very, very blessed that way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Genetics do play a huge part in it, a very big, huge part in it. I mean, I can attest to that. It was almost just like I wanted to say, oh, all right, stop boasting, because my waist to shoulder to hip ratio is fucking crap, I have to say. I mean, you've seen my physique anyway. Just like trying to pose. I remember, I think it was back in 2017 actually, and you were trying to teach me how to spread my lats properly to make my waist look smaller. And I'm like, no matter how big these wings are, mate, my waist is always going to look like it's small. But the amount of videos that we went back and forth, and you were like, try doing this and blow yourself up, and I'm like, no, still chunky. It just isn't happening for me. But yeah, I mean, let's get onto the subject of nutrition then. So in terms of like taking things to the extreme as the natural for the IFBB, did you have to do anything grossly different than you normally did beforehand? Obviously this would be your let's think about, is this your fourth professional prep that you've done, coming from quite a high?
So I guess you could say, yeah, I mean, my first pro show was the Worlds at 2013. So if you could really count that as kind of sort of, you know, your foot in the water or dipping your toe in. And then 14 was a bit of a write-off rubbish year. And so, yeah, so maybe fourth or fifth year professionally, I would get there.
Did you find that you had to dig deeper this time around to get to the condition that you had to in terms of like nutritional loss?
Do you know what? No, I don't think so. I think that 2016 and 2017 taught me an awful lot. From getting a sore result at the Grand Prix. Arguably, obviously, after I look back at photos, it was like, probably I've left the door open, so I deserve to get beat.
Yeah.
That then transitioned from that to Worlds. It made me like go to the next level again with regards to condition. And then once you've raised that bar, that's now your bar. So it's kind of like that taught me an awful lot of that's where I need to go to get in shape. What I tend to find is, and this is the position I'm in now, is that what happens is when you, for me, if you're fat off season and you are getting into contest condition, I had to do an awful lot of things to get into contest condition, but it almost feel like you are rushing it all the time. Even if, I mean, I had, you know, started prep in September last year. So what happened is that I was doing an hour and a half's worth of cardio a day. My food was very low on low days. So calorie, obviously expenditure was high. Food was low. Obviously I was still doing like a carb cycle, so I was having some high days at the weekend. Mm-hmm. But it's little things like my legs were awfully tired going to the show. They're about 50% better already. Like I'm super excited that they've bounced back again from just not walking an hour and a half a day, like just getting on the step for 20 minutes a day. So that's really, really good. But I just think that you have to be in shape and then spend time there. Yeah. So for me, like now, like say 5 to 6 weeks out from my first pro show, it's like you haven't got to do that kind of yield of expenditure. You're already lean, and especially for naturals, you can, once you're there, you can maintain that physique a lot better if you're on a decent amount of food. You're not killing yourself with cardio. Your physique is just going to get, your skin's going to get tighter, physique's going to get harder, and you can up your food, your body's chilled, and you're not chasing fat loss. When you're chasing fat loss, it's hard. And I think, as I said, I knew, I guess, where I'd raised the bar to trying to get back there. But as I said, I didn't quite achieve that, but it was good enough. So it's kind of, as I said, it's going to be much more improved. But as I think the moral of the story is that you have to sort of be in shape and then spend time there to really kind of get that, condition where it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do remember seeing back in like 2016 your first starting point where you started your 12-month prep, and I remember speaking to Darren as well, Darren Loswell, coach DSL, and he was like, "Do you know what? I'll be honest, we were slightly worried about Bob in his whole season."
I remember seeing that as well. I was like, "Wow!"
Do you remember? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember this perfect, beautiful photo of you with a cigar, and it was just with your belly, with your cigar. It was like, wow, Bob, and how you can get into that beautiful classic shape. It's just like, oh, do you know what? Sometimes, Bob, I don't like you very much.
It's one of them, though, isn't it? As I said, like, I definitely don't advocate it for everybody, but on the same side, like I do have like the fat gene, I'm sure of it. Like
somewhere.
I very much can eat like next to nothing off season if I go on holiday, or if I go away for a period of time. Like we went traveling last year with we did a bit of work in Australia, and then we went traveling up the Gold Coast for like 3 to 4 weeks, and like I was eating maybe 2 to 3 meals a day because it was just like access to food, what we was eating, and I was gaining weight. Like I was gaining weight like by the day. So it's just like, for me, my body is, unless I'm like absolutely on top of everything, it's like I just get fat looking at a cake. So it's kind of, one of them things.
Oh, bless you. Do you not think, though, that it is actually down to your expenditure as well? Because obviously just eating 3 meals a day, of course, it's going to be more calorific. Your expenditure is going to be less. So realistically, you'd probably put yourself in a surplus anyway.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's just a hard one, because I think on reflection, you're right. Like, if I'm really honest, I think indirectly, maybe I don't do as much, and is that because you then put on weight, so therefore you're then getting lazier and that kind of thing? And do you switch off after prep? You're like, I just can't wait to not have to go do, an hour of cardio today. But I think that's got better as like the time has gone on. Like I've really enjoyed like morning walking and stuff. It just kind of set me up for the day like that. And I think that, and I say this every year, and I'm sure my missus is laughing in the kitchen now, laughing about it, but I will for sure keep some higher activity out in the off season, like with morning walks and things like that, to try and not get as fat.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the questions that I got from one of the listeners, was basically like, how do you cope with getting fat in the off season? So I suppose that answered that question. Bob just has a fat gene.
A fat gene. And do you know what? Coping with being fat, I say this, right? If you've got a good set of abdominals, right, and you get to the point where they're getting cloudier and cloudier and cloudier and they're looking disappearing, that phase is terrible. That is where most people go, I need to go on a diet. But for me, once I get out of that and they disappear, then it's like, it's cool. Like, I don't mind being fat. But it's almost like that, looking each day, your abs disappear in the mirror, and that's like, you're actually stressed out about it. And then all of a sudden I'm totally cool with it. So it's kind of like, the quicker I get them not visible, probably the better for my mental state.
Bring on the cake bloat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of like pass that over to, sorry, Jack, I know I'm just going to interrupt you all the time now. I just want to like cross that over to the female perspective, right? Because females tend to get blurry backsides and blurry legs before they blur their abs. So it's like the other day, me and Jack were training and we were posing and I just lifted up my shirt and I still had a set of abs. So Jack's shouting at me saying, don't you dare go on a mini cut or anything like this. But my ass and my legs are fat. So it's like, what would you actually say to some females in that terminology? I mean, I don't care. I'm putting on weight at this moment in time anyway, because hella off season.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on where you've taken your body fat with regards to on a prep.
Sure.
I think like, how productive are you in the gym if you are like, trying to maintain like, the sort of that lean physique, if you like. I think it's like, if it's like certain areas, I think that, genetically, I think that maybe between male and female, we've all got, how should we say, like certain areas that just go on easier. Like for me, it's always around the midsection, and say for women, it might be around the butt and legs kind of thing. So I think it's just maybe something that we sort of just like deal with to a certain point. But I think it comes down to a mental aspect, because like, if you put on a little bit of weight, but like your performance in the gym is like way up, like you can deal with it. I think if we're just looking from like a perspective of how you look, then maybe it's something that can be addressed. But yeah, as I said, I just think that it is very much down to the individual, but it's also, it's necessary, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I totally agree. Jack likes getting fat, don't you?
I love getting fat. It's a hobby of mine. I lose life-changing amounts of weight for fun. If you're not losing 60 pounds in one go, then what are you playing at? No, I think you're right. Like being a little bit detached from your physique does definitely help you to progress it. Just allowing it to get a little bit soft. I found like, especially when I was natural, that really helped me progress my physique quite a bit. Just not really caring about, how aesthetic I am in the off season. Just focus on driving numbers up, and focus on getting the food in and just growing really. And then
I would say that's my biggest concern and my biggest priority in the off season is performance.
Yeah,
totally.
Like arguably, I think this year I've learned a lot in the retrospect that it probably took 3 stone maybe before my performance started dipping. That 3 stone wasn't far off my top numbers at all. So that shows me that maybe past that point, it doesn't get to the point where it's like it's benefiting me, but the top end numbers are better. And I do feel good in the gym. So I just think it's one of them things that kind of has to be addressed with regards to, what your priority is with regards to like off season. For me, it's just getting stronger, so therefore yielding more muscle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in terms of your training, would you normally just kind of stick to a high volume approach, or do you do like top sets, back off sets, and intensity methods and that kind of thing as well?
A bit of a mix, I think, but I would say I'm pretty bro in that retrospect. Like, there's some feeder sets in there, there's top sets in there, maybe some back off sets. I always like back off sets on the main movements. Like if I go to a heavy set of bench for 5, I'm probably going to do a set of 12, like lighter the set after, and maybe squats, maybe bent over rows or drop sets. So yeah, so maybe there's some of that, but I definitely think that, like I've done, trained on some of the sessions where it's like almost you're just kind of like touching that way you get the top sets. And I think I like the sort of more of a feeder set of like going through 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and still doing maybe 6 to 8 reps on all of them. I find that's the way I've probably pretty much always trained without really analysing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. You are definitely more bro and anecdotal camp rather than scientific daisy chains and hoops and whistles, aren't you? Yeah. I agree. I like a good old barbell. I like feeling a barbell.
Do you think like people can be too sort of scientific with it, and that sort of restricts the amount of progress that they can make with their training?
100%. Like I think that the whole process gets a little bit too kind of, with regards to what's popular. I mean, like the amount of questions I get at the moment, like, what's your maintenance calories? And it's like, for me, it's like, well, it doesn't really matter, because in the day, if you're on maintenance calories, let's say you're on 3,000 calories a day, but you sit at a desk all day and don't do anything, as you said before, then it's not relative. And the same as if I'm, a refuse collector and I'm walking 11 miles a day, it's completely relevant to what you're doing with regards to like a maintenance calorie. It's the same with training. You can very much go, okay, like we're going to follow this RPE scale and we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. But the end of the day, it really is like picking some heavy things up, putting them down again, eating a good ton of nutrition, and you will grow muscle. You can overcomplicate it all day long, but it's a pretty basic concept, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I find like it holds a lot of people back just because they're overthinking it, and they're like, Yeah,
definitely. And that's some of that's maybe caused by, because, like some people are very good at doing that. Some people are very good at analyzing their training, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like people who logbook and like work on percentages and stuff, great. But for the average guy out there who just, there's so much thought about that as opposed to actually just going and actually trying hard and putting some weight on the bar. Like it's very, very easy to do that, like reps and reserve and all that kind of stuff. I said it's probably just if they just did basics and didn't look at a book, they'd probably end up progressing anyway.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I just like to do that. Yeah, I really do agree with it. It's like, I do understand the science. I do understand the reps and reserve. And I think for general population clientele who are just getting into the gym, it's like we were talking about previously, then yeah, absolutely. Don't go to failure. Don't go to absolutely, like killing yourself, because you'll never go back. You will never go back. I've literally just started programming a strongman who was playing at strongman. So when I actually did him a strongman program, he's done one day. And he's voice noted me and he's like, okay, my legs are that sore, I can't even sit down to poo. So he's going to be constipated for a week. But this is all about learning how to train efficiently, appropriately for your particular goals.
Yeah.
So I do agree. Just get in, lift some heavy shit up, make sure that you eat and recover absolutely perfectly. And then, you'll have a physique like Bob. If only it was that simple. If only if it was that simple.
So a question I have, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people are wondering this now, Rob, is what are the next steps? Are you going to be competing in, the Pro League? Are you going to be competing in natural shows still? And are you going to be crossing over in the assisted side of things?
Okay, so a lot of questions. So first of all, yes, 100%. I'm doing the Rego Raw, which is in Watford, which is the first UK pro show, I think, this year. And for a long time, I think. So you've got like the British Grand Prix is happening on the same day. So they're putting on men's physique, they're putting on open bodybuilding, they're putting on classic physique. So that's all going on the same day. So that's the first question. Second question was, am I going to be doing natural shows and IFBB pro shows? So the answer is just IFBB pro shows.
Okay.
And the reasoning for that is because you actually, for people who want to know, you can't do any other federations. So once you get an IFBB pro card, if I was to compete in a natural federation or the PCA or anyone else, you automatically lose that pro card and you would have to win your pro card again.
Okay.
So it's not something that even if I wanted to, which, I would have loved to have done the Grand Prix this year, because one of my best mates who I train with pretty much every day, Lewis Smith, is doing a Grand Prix. And since him coming around to my house and training together through lockdown and giving each other nothing but shit about it the whole time of who was going to take home that second place trophy out of me and him, I've wanted nothing more to do that show. But obviously that is just the hand I'm dealt. I think that really, is it a bad thing? No, because it means progressing on, and that's nothing to take away anything from the caliber of obviously the top natural shows and worlds, because obviously, I never got to win the overall at Worlds. I think that was, one thing that I'd obviously be gutted never to win. But as I said, it's just a different realm of things now. So, so that's where it pretty much stands. There is actually kind of like a few little unwritten rules of what you can and can't do as an IFBB pro.
Okay.
So there's that, first of all. So, and secondly, 100%, I'm going to stay natural. The only reason I say that is because it's something I've thought about for a long, long time. And of course, I've asked myself that question, whether I would or wouldn't. I think that I think that if you went to like a pro show and you got absolutely spanked and it was what I wanted to do career-wise, then maybe I would consider it. But to be honest, I think that I've done really, really well without taking anything. I think that once you cross over, you can't go back. And that's the thing. I wouldn't want to regret that either after, 20 years in the game.
Yeah.
I think, thirdly, I think that trying to think where I'm going to go with this really. But yeah, I think it's a decision you have to make. But I think, do you know what was the overwhelming response from when I did win the pro card was how many people natural who basically text me to say, I've not wanted to go to the gym for 2 years and you've just made me want to go back to the gym because I feel like in my country, we don't have natural bodybuilding. This makes me want to go and bodybuild. Now that by itself, it's like, I've just realized that's probably created a whole niche in the market for me to be like, not so much the poster boy, because I don't want to sound like a dick, but really.
Brilliant.
But it's like, if that gives people encouragement to want to stay down that path, because it's just a personal choice. And as I said, I'm a huge bodybuilding fan, first and foremost. So I really couldn't care less whether people do or they don't. It's just a personal choice. And I think that I can do well enough, even if I come and get absolutely spanked in this pro show, which is probably what will happen. It's cool because all it's done is just like, it's raised my profile enough for what I wanted to do originally with coaching. So that's obviously, it's been on a sort of straightforward, trajectory, if you like. And I just think that for the people that have reached out and stuff, it's good to it's for me now more than ever realize that from the results of the show, everything that made me win on that day was probably because I wasn't assisted. Mm-hmm. And that's no disrespect to the other guys. It's just that for classic bodybuilding, I had a neater waistline, condition was good enough. And it's like all them things. It's like, that's probably what has edged you over somebody else. So yeah, it's a big decision. And perfectly honestly, I'd never say never, because I don't know how I'm going to feel in 5 years' time. If you spend 5 years' time at the back of the stage and you're constantly just getting spanked, and that's what I want to do, then maybe it's a conversation I'd have at that time. So that I can kind of be open and say that. But on the same side, I think that, I've done pretty well so far. And as I said, from the very, very start of natural bodybuilding. So there's almost no reason for me still to do it,
I completely respect that. I respect that. I completely understand that as well. Because, where you're coming from with being sort of an example, there's a lot of people that can now look at you and go, that's attainable naturally. That makes me want to work hard in the gym and work towards that. And I can.
There was such an awful lot of people, and people are texting me, still saying, please tell me that you are still natural doing these shows. Yeah, 100% I still am. I was it would almost I almost want the people who sort of come out and go, the fake natty argument, it's such a cool thing to not be a fraud and not be someone who's he claims natural, but he's doing this, because as I said, I think if I ever do it, I'll just be outspoken about it, because I might get a lot of flack from all the natural guys who I've inspired, but that would still be my personal choice to do that. So I think, but for the same side, it's nice to know, I can speak about it on podcasts and people can ask me, and I'm not then going oh yeah, but I did this. It's I was already planning to do the Grand Prix, a few weeks after this show. So, it's if I'd had a crossed over, then I would have had to have done it already. And because if I didn't win the pro card and stuff, I still would have been doing them other shows. So,
exactly. I think it's because so many people look at shows like Two Bros, they look at the caliber of the athletes and they just kind of think, well, that's not attainable naturally, so why should I even bother trying to grace the stage? But if you remember, they said the same thing about you when you won the JP Classic.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing. It's a lot of other guys there were bigger and probably in better condition. But for Classic, I said it's criteria.
Exactly.
You have to have shape and flow and a good midsection and know how to pose, like that all is what's supposed to be classic bodybuilding. And as I said, guaranteed, if that had been judged like a bodybuilding show, I wouldn't have made the top 5 in my own class. Maybe 4th. But not in my own class, let alone the overall. So as I said, like that's for people who look at pictures who don't follow bodybuilding, they'll be like, well, how was that guy won?
Yeah, exactly.
But, it's criteria. It's not just judged as a bodybuilding show.
That's it. I mean, in the JP Classic one that you won on that side of things, I remember this picture of you standing next to the other guy. And I think he came second. I can't actually remember. But he was
like 3rd or 4th, and he was gigantic, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. You know, like those little Barbie and Ken dolls and shit like that? You looked like a Ken doll next to him. I'm just like, what the hell is going on there?
I remember seeing him backstage and thinking, how is this guy in my class?
Yeah, how is he classic though? Because he didn't fit that flowy criteria in my personal point of view.
And I mean, that was the thing that really stood out as well, was like presentation. Like, you know, so many people in like classic physique still, they spend so much time on like getting hard and dieting and being good bodybuilders, but not. I had the absolute best analogy from one of my friends who doesn't bodybuild the other day. With regards to presentation on stage, he's like, can you imagine going on MasterChef and putting together like this best meal you've ever made, and then before you serve it up to the judges, you put it in a paper bag and smash it all over the table? It's like, you would never do that. And that's pretty much what people do when it comes to presentation for posing. It's like, it's an afterthought of like, I better run through some quarter turns. And it shows when on a classic physique stage. I mean, you know, more in classic than it does in normal bodybuilding. You can get away with just being like gnarly hard and like huge, and you can't really pose very well. You'll not get as penalized for it. But in classic, it's like, show us your classic pose, and then you're going to stand there with your hands on your hips. That's not a classic pose, you know. That's kind of like something that like went in my favor again, because I'd put that time and effort into doing that.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely, I see that, and that's like quite evident in the Olympia. You see how they present themselves in the open class, and then you see the presentation in the classic, and it seems to be a lot more thought out.
You watch someone like Terence Ruffin pose, and like it's mesmerizing.
This is what we want to go to class.
Like, that's fantastic. And you know, whether the bigger guys can't move like that, because I mean, get someone like Rolly Winkler, you know what I mean? Like, you can't move like that. It's ridiculously big, you know. But as I said, like you can do the mandatories better, and you can polish those.
So,
It's good. And it's the same for women as well, you know. Women unfortunately they just do not know how to pose. I was seeing some in the NPC that happened this weekend. And you just look at their posing, and it's like, Jesus, girl, you know, come on, put some bloody effort into it. I hate it. I always nail my poses when I do my weekly photographs. I always run through my quarter turns. My routines and shit, I just have to kind of like, you know, polish those 8 weeks out, because that's what I do. And you know what? I'd never ever want to do them beforehand, because all of my routines are nailed on stage, and it's always like, okay, great, I've got a good routine. That's the one that I can always nail. But it's the quarter turns that I just kind of shit myself over. And I'm just like, oh, I've twisted the wrong way. So that's the reason why I always do it every single week. It is all practice. So that is a big tip.
Good.
Everybody needs to do.
It's a good thing to do. It's good if you've got a coach you're checking in with as well to be able to pose properly. Like, you know, it just helps. When you're looking at people, you think, oh, well, if I just maybe move them around a little bit, it might look a bit better.
Yeah, exactly. Right, I'm going to ask the next question, because this one's quite an interesting one, and it is a little bit personal, hence the reason why I asked at the beginning, do you want to not talk about anything? Are you worried by going from fat to prep? They actually use the word skinny, but I'm not going to use that, because Bob is not skinny.
You can say skinny face if you like, I don't mind that.
Yeah, skinny face. From going from fat to where you are now, are you worried about testosterone levels in terms of having children in the future?
No, not at all.
No.
It's kind of a funny one, really. I mean, I guess that I think very much, you know, libido and testosterone levels is very much individual. Like, I'll give you a bit of a backstory, which might kind of like, it opens a question for a lot of people with regards to genetics. So in 2013, first year I won my pro card, my epitestosterone to testosterone was borderline. Now, what that means is in WADA, you used to be able to be what they call a 6-to-1 ratio. So your epi-testosterone to your testosterone could be a 6-to-1 before it was a fail.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember if you've seen like the Lance Armstrong documentary? So they were always like basically in the labs trying to basically get that like 5.99999, like, okay, closest to without it being a fail. So what happens was they then brought that back down to a 4-to-1 ratio. So what basically happens is they then go, right, well, if that's 1% of the population in England, if you like, can be like above a 4. So they then drop that scale down to make it more broad spectrum. So what happens from that point onwards is that anyone who obviously, free testosterone, if you like, is over a certain amount, then obviously it would be considered as a failed drug test. So in 2013, mine was a 3.8. So I was two point under. To bear in mind, most people are a 1-to-1. So if you're a 2-to-1, that's high. 3-to-1 is very high. Anything above that, you're like within 10% of the 5% of the country.
Yeah.
So that's that, first of all. So for myself, naturally have a very high testosterone level anyway, even on prep, still the same. But what happened was, so 2016, when I won Worlds, I came back as a 4.2-to-1. So I failed a drug test in 2016, and I had to pay £400 of my own money to basically prove that testosterone has not come from synthetic use.
Yeah.
So when you use what you call a carbonized isotope test. So you have the option at that point. They go, Davey J on the phone, really sorry, some bad news. You failed a drug test. I basically laughed and just said, all right, cool. What do I have to do? And he's like, right, well, you have to pay for a test to basically prove that testosterone is your testosterone. I'm like, yeah, cool. Where do I send the check? So basically I had to wait like 5 weeks for my results. Comes back, yep, that testosterone is all in your body as normal. It's not from synthetic or other use. And therefore, obviously, that's why you're not actually failed a drug test. It's just that's what happens. Now, there's lots of people I know that have failed drug tests in the BMBF who have been banned from competition. It's not been named and released, who have not wanted to pay that £400 to prove whether they're natural or not. Now, for me, I know that like that's completely my reputation on the line. So for me, 100%, I'm going to, if it was £1,000, I'd beg, steal and borrow and ask my parents, whatever, for that money if I had to. Yeah. So that's what happened. Then 2017, it came back high again. It was like 4.2, but it's consistently high. So that's how it is. There's people in America, as Davey was telling me, David J, the drug enforcement guy at the BMBF, of American people who come back at a 16-to-1. From a completely natural. So when we talk about testosterone, genetically, there is people out there who just naturally have a high testosterone. Lewis Smith is one of them as well, naturally very, very high. And other people can just be completely in their boots all the time. Yeah. So genetically, I think that plays a role in muscle growth as well. It has
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, it has to. So, so as I said, like being concerned about it on prep, to kind of answer the question is like, no, because it's usually pretty good. Yes, it does kind of really fall towards the end. But I think that's only when you're really, really lean. And I always get out of that hole very quickly with regards to calorie surplus.
Sure.
So I don't reverse out like, a granny out of a driveway. I'm straight out of that hole as much as I can increase the calories to get myself feeling better. And then take my time from that point onwards. And then you should find everything starts to kick back into gear. I think the harder you push contest prep, definitely the longer it takes you to get out of it. Yeah. I think 2017, and obviously I'm still in it this year, but I actually feel pretty good, to be honest. But 2017 was like, a really long recovery. It was like 6 months before I actually felt like really good again in the gym and stuff. Like I felt good, but where you're like, yeah, I'm absolutely like, firing on all cylinders, so to speak. So yeah, it's a really interesting question, but as I said, I think genetically, yes, it plays a role. And yeah, it wasn't something I was concerned with because it's probably higher than most people's anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Genetically, it makes a big difference. I mean, if you think about it, take exactly the same scenario, but with a woman who has a higher testosterone level because they have polycystic ovary syndrome, right? They are automatically stronger, they're more muscular, they have more masculine physiques as well, and they have better muscle density, even from a young age, if they've got PCOS. The only thing that's difficult for them is obviously losing the body fat, because it's a bit of more of a slog from that side of things. So, and the fact is that if you do want to cross over for muscle enhancements and using PEDs, the first thing that you're going to go to is a testosterone base. So you basically put more testosterone into your body in a synthetic manner. So if you naturally have a higher than normal, so you're the outlier, I suppose, a higher than normal testosterone level as a baseline, then hell yeah, it's going to give you a damn good genetic advantage. So what a really good question. I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a really interesting point, because what I've not actually had ever done is like blood work to see what my actual testosterone is. I'd like to know.
It would be really interesting to do that, and I would love to actually invite you on to do something like that when you have the time. Obviously this can be afterwards, but
because what I would like to know is what the equivalent would be to synthetic use. Like, would it be like total minimal dosages, or would it be what some guys are banging in the gym to get to that point? So I'm already here, and they'd have to go synthetic to do that. And I said that's just my genetic advantage. That's same. I guess you could make the case for any other sort of genetic components when it goes to other sports.
Yeah, we'll talk about that afterwards. I shall do the thing. But yeah, that would be very, very interesting, because I'd like to I do all of these scientific big things. But there is a couple of other things that we could actually talk about to see if it does relate back to your natural baseline. Again, this is just like a scientific study that I do with other people, but I'll talk to you about that.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously number of factors like how you diet as well, to regards to what you retain. So we talked about that question before. I think that fats play a massive role. I always feel way better, obviously, if you're on super high carb and your fats are nowhere, you feel terrible. But they're just up that little bit, but you bring your carbs down and you're kind of in that place where you actually feel a lot better just in yourself. I think that plays a role. So as I said, I think it could be the way you've dieted, how lean you get, what you've done to achieve that leanness. Like I said, if you're doing 2 hours of cardio a day and eating very, very minimal foods to get to that level of body fat, then 100%, your reproduction's the last thing on your body's mind. So, that's why your testosterone would just
plummet. Interesting. Right. So I've done a really interesting question. Jack, we are coming up past the hour now. So have you got a question that you want to finish off on, or anything else that you want to ask Mr. Waterhouse?
See, we've answered quite a lot of them, actually. No, yeah, we've pretty much answered every single one. Through the flow of conversation, so we must be answering the frequently asked ones. Yeah, so have you got any more questions, Vic?
I've just got the one that I like to ask everybody, realistically, on my own podcast. So I thought I'd cross over and bring it into For the Love of Oats. Bob, if you could sit down with anybody at a dinner table, the 3 top people, who would they be? They can be living or dead.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, definitely number 1. Hopefully with a cigar. His autobiography, the Total Recall, and the other book, I think his is the only book I've ever properly read. Do you know what I mean? Being fascinated with it, and he's such an interesting story, and people don't realize his drive to success, what he did, and kind of how he went about it. His life is properly interesting. So that would be, I think, number 1. I think hard to name 3. I guess there's lots of other sporting people who but I guess there's no one really who's kind of been Jay Cutler, definitely another one, and obviously both bodybuilders. Yeah. But he was someone I kind of idolized and followed all that time. So, from very much bodybuilding earlier on. And I'd love to say someone else. I think Mike Tyson Mike Tyson.
Oh, that'd be a good one. Yeah, he'd be quite cool.
You know, obviously seeing him on the like Joe Rogan podcast and stuff like that. He's just an interesting character, isn't he?
Very
So I'm saying that, yeah, maybe Liam Gallagher as well. Was a big Oasis fan, so maybe him is quite interesting. But yeah, it's hard. I think, you know, I think that what I would probably get the most out of is probably like people who I've followed like through bodybuilding and have that kind of, you know, success and, you know, being at the top and kind of that, you know, like kind of what because they've all got that kind of like champion mindset, right? So it's kind of like, you know, you feed off people like that and you'd learn a lot, I think.
Absolutely. That's why me and Jack train together, because he helps me and I teach him.
That's good. That's good. So what's both of your plans has taken off without asking me all the questions? What are you both up to anyway?
Oh God, well, Jack has stopped eating oats because he stopped dieting now. So, you know, the name of the show is now obsolete, really.
What are you, team cream of rice now then, or what?
Well, to be fair, I'm still having some oats and cream of rice, so you know I'm still eating a lot of baby food consistency things. But no, yeah. As regards to what we're up to is
so like, I mean, are you guys competing next year? Are you just basically season getting swole, or what's the?
So my aim at the moment is to just be at a position where I'm good enough to obtain a pro card. Now we're trying to do it in the open at the moment, so it's going to take a few years. So that's we're potentially thinking 2022. If ready, I'll just take as long as it needs to get to that point. But yeah, basically the goal is the pro card and to be a decent competitive one.
Brilliant.
Me and Vic are training a lot together at the moment. We are, you know, filming some stuff, filming the journey and things like that. So
cool. You're training at Strength Asylum, right?
Yeah, Strength Asylum and also Apex, which is pretty close to Strength as well. So they're the two gyms I'm going to and from at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just analysing what I do in this off season. Basically, stand there next to my black curtain, send some pictures over to Jack, and just kind of go, "Am I too fat yet? No, you're not too fat yet. Okay, so I still need work." So, basically, what I want to do is I do want to compete next year. That is what my main priority is. That's what my main goal is that I want to compete next year. But I just basically want to do it a bit better. The last couple of years that I did, I think I did come in too lean, not full enough, because a depletion was just not suiting me. I don't think that I should run a depletion. So that's basically one of the things that I don't want to do.
We spoke about that, didn't we? It's like, just, you know, no matter how much you're putting in, it's almost like you can't dig yourself out of that ditch if sometimes. Some physiques are like that, you know?
Yeah, and mine was, you know, mine certainly was. I'm just about starting to get better now, you know, in that kind of tolerant level. But I eat a lot of food in the off season. And which is great, you know, I eat a lot of food. I do very minimal cardio unless I'm doing some stupid fucking challenge that I thought would be a great idea in lockdown to do this bloody, you know, 16 hours worth of rowing for the shits and giggles after a full powerlifting meet. I mean, why the hell would you do that? Do you know, my dad actually brought this up to me and he said, "Have you checked that there's actually like a Guinness record that anybody's done that before?" I said, "I don't actually know whether they have. But I might have to check." It being like the world's craziest fucking thing to do in lockdown about something, you know? But yeah, that's what my plan is. I'm just going to see where I'm at, probably come January time, and then have a look, because I've been away from stage properly now since 2017, because I only did the Ultimate Athlete in 2018. It
flies, doesn't it? It absolutely flies.
Yeah. Well, in 2018, it wasn't even a proper prep, you know, because it was the Ultimate Athlete. I just did not want to be a bodybuilder on stage or a competing bodybuilder in 2018. And it was the best decision, really. So in all honesty, I've been away from stage since 2017. So I should have put on some kind of tissue at somewhere, maybe in my back pocket. Don't know. But we'll see. We'll see. And if I need to take another year out, then I'll take another year out. You know, I don't want to go on stage looking the same at the end of the day. So that's what I'm not going to do.
Awesome.
But anyway, we have taken up enough of your Sunday evening, so thank you so, so much for spending some time with us. I will get back in touch with you and talk about some sciencey stuff, but probably do that after you've done your pro show, because that's, you know, you need to really commit to that, my man. And I don't want to be taking any more stuff out of your body that you're already losing. But anyway, guys, right, lovely to see you. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, if you've got any questions, oh, go on, sorry.
Before we finish, Rob, have you got anything you want to plug? Your coaching, your Instagram, anything like that?
Yeah, you can't help but plug a little bit, can we? So, yeah, so coaching-wise, I am actually getting very close to capping numbers at the moment, because I obviously do a normal job as well. We promote health clubs all around the UK, so it's obviously like not getting through to a Sunday afternoon and having to go through all the check-ins in the world. So, but you can contact me on Instagram at bobwaterhouse86, or my email address, which is robertwaterhouse86@gmail.com. And also, please like and subscribe to the new YouTube channel. It's called the IFBB Pro. So I'm going to be doing a run-in with contest prep over the next 5 weeks to the show. So 1 episode a week at least, obviously because I'm at work the rest of the week. Training with Big Lou, because he's going to be 5 weeks out from the Grand Prix as well. So if you give that a bit of a follow, leave us a nice comment on the YouTube and stuff, will be wicked. And yeah, that'd be much appreciated.
Awesome sauce. We'll make sure that all of those links are below in the comment boxes, as always. I don't know why I point. Nobody really going to do that.
Yeah,
it's not here. It's down here anyway. But and we will be back again next week with probably an awesome guest. And if not, you're just stuck with us two for the next episode of For the Love of Oats. Many thanks for listening, guys. We will see you soon.
Thanks, guys.